Hello. Today I'll be reading from Micah 6, verses 6 to 8, and Mark 12, verses 28 to 31. With what shall I come before the Lord, and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgressions, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now from Mark. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." The word of the Lord.
Wes, I need to talk to you. You seem a little bit disengaged lately. Is there something wrong? That's how I started out my bi-weekly meeting with my boss a few weeks ago. A million thoughts run through your mind when you hear that. You know that sinking feeling when your heart drops into your gut? That's what I got. And then your mind races. Am I disengaged? Am I? Really? What do I say to her? Does she really not know what's going on? Before I try to answer those questions, let me just back up a little bit. A couple of weeks ago, I celebrated my 30th anniversary at Manitoba Hydro. 30 years. God has graciously provided me employment with the same company for over 30 years. That seemed really unattainable when I started. I can remember back to my first year at 820 Taylor. A bunch of us would go for coffee every morning at 10 a.m. and we'd walk down that long hallway along Taylor Avenue, and you walk past a bunch of cubicles and you'd see the desks and the computers and the screensavers. We don't see screensavers anymore, but we did back then. And on this one guy's screensaver, he had the number 150. And then the next day I walked by and the number was 149 and 148. And 147. I didn't really know him, so I asked one of my coworkers, "What's that number on his screen?" And they said, "Oh, that's his retirement countdown." 147 days to freedom, 80. 80? The rule of 80. Age plus years of service makes you eligible for our pension. So, being young and brash, I went back to my desk and I calculated, what is my number to rule of 80? Calculated it out, 10,225. So I put it on my screensaver. And then my supervisor came by, "What's that?" I said, "Well, that's my retirement countdown." And we had a good laugh. Well, I just passed 10,950 days. So I can retire. I'm past my best before date at Hydro. In February, I went to see Les Mis with Michaela and Robin at the concert hall. And as I reflect on 30 years at Hydro, sometimes I feel like Jean Valjean. A man convicted of a crime, serving his time in hard labor. Les Mis starts with Valjean about to be released from prison after 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread. 19 years. I had to do over 30 at Hydro. So that's where I am when I begin this reflection of God in my life. I face the threshold of retirement. Maybe I am, as my boss says, a little less engaged than I was. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting ready for the next phase. We'll see. Now, as I look around the room here at FaithWorks, I'm not the only gray-haired person in the room. For many in our community, retirement has been there, done that, or doing that. And I would not presume to think that I can stand here or sit here, because I have a cold today. I have my fisherman's friend in my cheek, and I just finished my glass of hot tea, so hopefully I last the whole time. I would not presume to think that I can tell you more about retirement than you already know. But there are also some younger people here who are just starting out in their careers, and there's some people who are right in the middle. Maybe this is me reaching out to share some thoughts from someone who has gone before, or asking for advice from people who've gone before me. Just know that this is me reflecting on how God has brought me to this stage in my life and what I may do next. When I suggested to Rob a few weeks ago that I was thinking about talking about this, he said, "Sounds great." But I was struggling with how to collect my random thoughts into a teaching time, so Rob suggested that I buy a book. So I bought a book. Books are great to help you focus your thoughts and put some context behind them. I found this one online, on Amazon, used, $6, perfect. It's called An Uncommon Guide to Retirement, and it's by Jeff Hannon. Jeff's bio says he is the founder and executive director of Denver Institute for Faith and Work, an educational nonprofit that explores issues of faith, work, calling, and culture. One of the things Jeff does in the book is this. He takes common thinking about retirement, and then he contrasts an uncommon thought. So the world's common thinking versus faith and God's uncommon thinking. And I found it to be quite instructive. And as you can tell by the little green tabs I have here, I marked a lot of things that really spoke to me. Now, Jeff's a finance guy. And one of the first things that he does, the first stories that he tells in the book, is about an ad campaign by an insurance company called ING. You may remember the ad campaign. It was called "What's Your Number?" The advertisement had people walking around in public with a number attached to them, floating over their head or tucked under their arm, and it was the amount of money that they needed to retire. The numbers varied from person to person, but they were all quite large. And it made me think, what's my number? What's your number? What's our number? So, that's not real. I'm not a real advertisement. But as you can tell from the title of my teaching time, I am more than my number, I believe that God says that we are more than our number. Retirement is more than just finances. Now, I have to say I have been fortunate to have a job that provides a pension so that I can rely on it to assist me when I do make the decision to retire. Despite my earlier portrait of myself as prisoner 24601 at Hydro, I don't really feel that way. God has been very gracious to me, allowing me to work there for 30 years. Now, Jeff Hannon's book has several themes in it, but three of them that stood out to me that I want to talk about a little bit today are Sabbath, identity, and calling. In his TED Talk, Riley Moynes from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College says that retirement generally unfolds in 4 distinct phases: the honeymoon phase, the disenchantment phase, the reorientation phase, and then the stability phase. As a manager at Manitoba Hydro, I have seen many employees process the decision to retire. Some handle it gracefully and with joy, but others dread it. One of my direct employees right now, who I've worked with for over 20 years, is off on sick leave. He's 65. He thinks that he has to retire, but he has no idea what he's going to do next. He can't wrap his head around what it means for him not to come to work every day. And he's lost. And he's making himself sick. On Thursday, I said goodbye to my friend Kevin, who I studied with at university. And we worked together for almost the whole 30 years I've been at Hydro. Kevin was disenchanted with work and with what he was achieving, and he felt he needed to leave. But he is looking forward to things, to working, being with his kids more, to being at the lake, things he can do outside. He says he may come back to work someday and back to the industry. He's only 55 years old. I'm intrigued by the notion of retirement and the possibility of a rest after a long career, but I'm cautious of going into that disenchantment phase. In Hannon's book, he talks about the early phases of retirement as a sabbatical. But a sabbatical is not just going on a vacation. Biblically, the Sabbath, or a sabbatical, is a period of feasting and worshiping. It's focused on justice and loving your neighbor. In the book of Exodus, God says, "Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy." And then he goes on it you shall do no work, neither you nor your son or daughter, your male or female servant, nor your animals, or any foreigner in your town. The Bible continually connects the observance of Sabbath with justice. Why would a sabbatical or retirement be any different? Sabbatical is a space and time for seeing where you otherwise were too busy or distracted to see during your career. Hannon says the common view of retirement is this: retirement is recreation, a leisure time. The uncommon view is that retirement is recreation, an ingredient in renewal. Bill and Carla Rademacher were part of our community for several years. Bill passed away 2 years ago in 2024, but during his retirement, I don't know if you know this, but he was pursuing a degree in fine arts at the University of Manitoba. I find that inspiring. Not the fine arts part, that's not me, but the studying. Who knew that the University of Manitoba offers free courses to those over the age of 65? I may take them up on it. I think I'll study law. Robin doesn't know that yet. Pastor Melanie is preparing to take a sabbatical, a well-earned one. She has seen this community through some trying and difficult times in the past few years, and she has done it well. I pray that she can plan for a time of rest and recreation and some recreation. Even more, I pray that we all can find Sabbath times in our everyday life and to rest and recharge and to find God. Another theme in Hannon's book is identity. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, says Deuteronomy, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. The Israelites were called to remember that the Sabbath that we just talked about was a reminder that their value was not derived from their work. It was a call to recenter their collective identity on God's vision for them as a people. The Israelites were God's treasured possession, a royal priesthood and a holy nation. In his book, Hannon says the common view of retirement is work is the source of our identity, versus the uncommon view, work was created for us to be an expression of our identity. Who am I if I'm not an engineer? I've spoken here at FaithWorks several times over the last few years, and I think every time I remind you that that's who I am. I'm an engineer. I'm also a baseball coach, and a husband and a father, and now a grandfather. But what is the core of my identity? Henry Nouwen wrote exclusively about aging, identity, weakness, and spiritual journey later in life. His reflection consistently challenged the modern tendency to define ourselves by usefulness, productivity, or achievement. One of Nouwen's central themes is that aging invites us to move from proving ourselves to belonging to God. He believed that many people spend their lives trying to answer the question, what can I accomplish? But later life confronts us with a deeper question. Who am I when I can no longer achieve, produce, or control? For now on, this can become a profound spiritual opportunity rather than a loss. He warned against building identity on success or career because those things inevitably fade. In his books, he emphasized that our true identity is found in being God's beloved children. Retirement, then, is not simply the end of work, but a transition into deeper dependence on God and deeper freedom from the need to earn significance. In his book, Life of the Beloved, Spiritual Living in a Secular World, Nouwen writes, "You are not what you do, although you do a lot. You are not what you have collected in terms of friendships and connections, although you may have many. You are not the popularity that you have received. You are not the success of your work. You are not what people say about you, whether they speak well or whether they speak poorly about you." Nouwen grounds identity spiritually rather than vocationally. I am here to remind you in the name of God that you are beloved daughters and sons of God. In Hannon's book, he also has a challenge about work and identity. He says the common view, work in a secular culture is about individual achievement and personal fulfillment, versus the uncommon view. Work is an expression of love because it's the principal way we serve the needs of our neighbors. For Christians, work is fundamentally about contribution to others and not compensation. It's an expression of our identity, not the source of our identity. It's about serving others, not personal success. For the better part of my career at Hydro, I have been a manager. I like to think of myself as an engineer, but I've actually spent more time managing people than doing engineering work. And it's been a source of great joy and great frustration dealing with people. I have been invited to their children's weddings. I have attended their parents' funerals. I have attended their funerals. I have rejoiced with them at the birth of their children, and I have encouraged them as they worked to grow their careers. Our world is one, secular and sacred, and the chief way to serve the Lord in our daily work is, and the chief way to serve the Lord is in our daily work. Work is the primary avenue for fulfilling God's command to love your neighbor as yourself. So everyone, whether you're just starting out in the workforce or if you've been working for a long time, needs to treat work as our way to love our neighbor. And if work is an act of love, whether paid or unpaid, it's an activity that should continue in different forms for as long as we're alive, even in retirement. So what is my calling at the end of my career? What is your calling wherever you're at? N.T. Wright, in his book Surprised by Hope, writes, "Our task in the present is to live as a resurrection people in between Easter and the final day, with our Christian life, corporate and individual, in both worship and mission, as a sign of the first and a foretaste of the second." That's our calling, to live as resurrection people. Hannon in his book talks about saving the concept of calling. He lists 4 myths that surround our current understanding of calling. My calling is to do what I love. 2, calling means getting my ideal job. 3, calling is a life stage. And finally, conversations about calling are just for 20-year-olds. Again, he compares the common and uncommon view of calling. Common. Discerning your calling involves skills inventories and a job search, versus the uncommon. Discerning your calling is moving outwards towards the majesty of God and a lifetime of service to Him. The biblical view of calling speaks to a much deeper satisfaction of following God in every circumstance, come what may. We find it in Micah 6:8. He has showed you what is good, and what does the Lord require, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. In Mark 12, love the Lord God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 16. Be joyful always, pray continually, giving thanks in all circumstances. On Thursday, I came home from work sick, and I slept all afternoon. I was feeling so rotten that I didn't even go to coach baseball, which takes a lot. While I was waiting for my assistant coach, Noah, to come pick up the stuff that he needed for the game, I was sitting on my couch scrolling through some videos on Instagram, and I came across a short clip from Mike Donahue. Mike is the lead singer of a Christian band called 10th Avenue North. He recently wrote a book called Finding God's Life for My Will, which explores the idea that Christians often become obsessed with discovering God's plan for their lives instead of learning to live daily in God's presence. A central line from his book is this: perhaps God isn't giving me the plan because He wants to be the plan. In the video clip, Mike answers the questions from the audience. He's asked about knowing God's will for his life. When did you know? When did you know it was God's will for you to be a musician? His response? It's not. If I believe that being a musician is God's will for my life, what happens if I get in a car accident and I break my throat and I can't sing? Or I break my fingers and I can't play? Or if I hurt my brain and I can't write lyrics? Will I have missed God's will for my life? That question has already been answered. God's plan for your life is not a career path. God's plan for your life is the posture of your heart. Jeff Hannon shares a story of a conversation that he had with his father. Some people have a calling, Jeff. The rest of us just have jobs. His dad shared his blunt, honest opinion, rooted probably in the pain of doing work that he didn't particularly enjoy for most of his life. To Jeff's father, calling is a conversation for the privileged or for ministers like Jeff. Jeff says he wished that he could have spoken more clearly to his father in that conversation. He would have said this: Dad, calling is not about a perfect life. Calling means first to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the highest calling that one can have, and you and I can both share. One that you and I can both share. So there you have it, my musings from the precipice of a potential retirement, looking back at a career and forward to what comes next. Sabbath rest, identity, and calling. You may retire from your job, but you never retire from being a resurrection people, called to a meaningful participation in God's new creation. My career was a gift from God, but a career can become spiritually dangerous when it becomes the foundation of your identity rather than a calling through which we serve God. Work is worthy and meaningful, but it was never meant to define our worth. Scripture reminds us that our deepest identity comes from being created in the image of God, not from our title, accomplishments, or productivity. When people build their identity entirely around their career, retirement can feel like a loss of purpose, or even a loss of self. But for Christians, retirement can instead become a spiritual recentering, an opportunity to rediscover that our value has always rested in who we are before God, not in what we do for a living. A couple of weeks ago, as I was in my early preparation for tonight, Robin could sense that I was struggling with what I was going to say. So as we sometimes do, we share little videos with each other. They're usually cute clips or funny ones, and for Robin that means people falling down. She loves to see people fall down. But this time she shared a video from Joshua Luke Smith. Joshua is a pastor, rapper, spoken word artist from Great Britain. It was an intro to his book entitled, "This is the Main Event." And it was amazing, poignant. Joshua is truly a gifted communicator. I would encourage you to seek out his work. So today, as I've reflected on rest, identity, and calling, I'd like to close by sharing one of Joshua's poems. What we fear most may happen. Joshua Luke Smith. What we fear most may happen. Loss and longing a constant here in the Shadowlands. So then how shall we live? We must stain God's shirt with our tears and announce how difficult it can feel to be here, but that we still are. And we must cut loose from self-sufficiency and trust fall into grace. We must protect ourselves from bitterness and a cynical heart. And so we must keep forgiving. We must trade in our armor for open arms, raised in surrender and praise and a welcoming embrace. And we must hold ourselves captive in the high castle of hope, blinded by wonder, bound by joy, and winded in reverence. We must put ourselves in the way of awe, and we must not define ourselves by our worst day, nor neither shall we by our best. Most of life is in the middle. We must enjoy each meal for the feast it is and raise our glasses, making extraordinary toasts on very ordinary days. And though the ache remains, we must keep loving. For the alternative is no alternative at all. We must keep living, one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. Amen.
Friends, we come now to the communion table, both an act of remembrance and an act that draws us together as the body of Christ. Here at FaithWorks, everyone is welcome at the table. Whether you feel close to God tonight, whether you feel far away, please come. You'll come to the front and you can take a piece of gluten-free bread and dip it in the cup. On each side, there will be people who will offer a blessing